Good morning. So, as you probably guessed, my name is Elena Kulinskaya, and I'm going to tell you about hip implant quality detection. This is a joint talk with Alexander Begun, who is also here, and also Alex McGregor, who is our expert on the proper hip replacement. He was president of a National Joint Register for a while. So my talk will tell you very quickly what is hip replacement about, and then about the data we've got, how we are trying to catch those faulty hips, and the results. In principle, the continuous monitoring of healthcare, and these days also social care across various providers, is a pretty important task. And for instance, in the UK, Care Quality Commission is entrusted with this task on a big scale. But also a number of professional bodies and registers take on the same function for their clinical discipline. You know that there is a cancer register, and for joint replacement, which are hips and knees and ankles, National Joint Register for England and Wales plays the same role. In Scotland, there is a separate Scottish Joint Register. 2 days ago, that was a headline in The Guardian. You will see that they started looking at the faulty implants in the UK, and in particular, this is about the hip replacement debut, which actually we will show you today we detect from our data. So it was kind of coincidence with this talk. How we are going to do it? We are going to use so-called cumulative sum or QSUM charts, which are pretty popular in industry for quality control. QSUM charts are used to accumulate deviations from the target performance, and therefore they could detect aberrant behavior quicker than any other statistical means. And they were initially employed for quality control in industry back in 1954 by Page. But since then, QSUMs are used in medicine in increasing amounts. In particular, QCC is using very simple QSUM charts, and also, say, Dr. Foster unit, which also monitors healthcare provision, also uses QSUM charts. They are much more simple QSUM charts that we are going to talk about here. So we expand this QSUM methodology, and we will show how to do it for hip replacements. So what is a hip replacement? Hip replacement is a surgical operation where the damaged hip joint is replaced by a prosthesis. And I will show you a picture in a moment how that is done. But basically, there are about 700 possible brands of implants which NGR and us would try to monitor over time. And what we are looking at as an outcome is the time to revision. Revision rates in hip replacements are really low. At 3 years, it's 1.6%, and at 10 years, it's 5.6%. That means that a hip replacement is supposed to stay there, say, for 20 years on average. And because of this long time to failure, it is very difficult to do, say, a clinical trial, because you won't see the results very soon. So many hip replacements where implants come to market without proper testing. And therefore, those continuous monitoring methods become really important to detect early aberrant behavior. So this is how the hip replacement is done. Anyway, on the picture on the right, you see 3 components of a hip implant. There is a stem, this pointy part which goes into the bone. There is a head, and there is a cup. And there are 2 different varieties of hip replacement. The total hip replacement includes all those three components. And then there is so-called hip resurfacing procedure, which just puts artificial cup in a socket and resurfaces the head of the femur instead of removing it. So that would just have a cup to a large extent. Well, so the data set of NGR consists of quite a lot of various data. There is data on the procedures, which include date of operation, date of revision, if any site operation was done on, and so on. There is information on the institution and staff involved, who has done it, surgeon grade, how experienced they are. All this is anonymized. There is details on the hip implant, which is a fixation type. You will see that there are, say, cemented and uncemented hips. That's how they are fixed to the bone. And then which were particular brands for the head and the cup and the stem. There are lots of combinations there. There is the size of the head, and there are bearing surfaces. For example, you can have metal on metal, hip replacements, or say ceramic on ceramic, and other variations. There is a lot of information about the patient, in particular age, sex. ASA physical status classification is a scale from 1 to 5. 1 is pretty healthy, 5 is near to death. There is index of multiple deprivation, IMD, and revision and death dates, if any. So we are going to use all this data for our analysis. Now, coming the methods. The thing is that time to revision of hip prosthesis is very different depending on the patient. For instance, younger patients wear their hips quicker because they're more active. So the older patients are, the more chance there is that the hip will stay there longer. And also it depends on the type of fixation, cemented, uncemented, and bearing surfaces. And because of that, this necessitates the use of case mix adjusted monitoring methods. But the problem is that the standard QSOM chart would monitor a process for some initial time period, and then would kind of estimate the parameters, and then would continue monitoring forever. We can't do that with hips because things change over time. New hips come on the market, old hips are being withdrawn, and basically the gold standard changes over time. So what we need to do is to define that gold standard adaptively, and then monitor other things against this change in gold standard. So because of that, we need to define the so-called control data set adaptively, fit a model on that control data set, and then see whether any of particular hip implants are deviating from that control standard. So we needed to clean the data a little bit. We decided to start from age 50 because there are practically not many patients younger than 50 there. We decided to take the data only from units which had enough of experience, and by that we defined the units who do on average at least once per week hip replacement. We decided not to look at patients who had hip replacement at both sides. We just look at patients who had hip replacement at one side, which is the majority of the patients. And this is what we get for our full data. So we got in total 252,000 of patients. You can see that the revision rate is just 3,431, so it's about 1.5%, I suppose. The death rate is about 8%. And you can see that we are going to look at 748 different brands of cup and head combinations, which we are trying to monitor. Average age is 70, and so on. And also majority of our patients, 209,000, are pretty healthy, and 42,000 are not very healthy. This is this ASA score at the bottom. So at each quarter Q, we decided to monitor the data over quarters, basically, starting from 2005, because the National Joint Register started in 2004, and the data we're looking at is up to 2012. At each current quarter, we are basically taking 80% of the most popular brands. And we would fit a model of those popular brands, believing that the popular means good, because we don't have any other way to define what good is. And if in the next quarter there are some new brands in those 80% of popular brands, we would add up that information to our model in the current quarter. So basically that allows to change our control set as we go along. So first task is to provide a model for time to revision in particular quarter Q. To do that, we use a proportional hazards model. We put a frailty component which takes into account that the patients from the same unit have a kind of correlation in their results, and also we are modeling the baseline hazard using a pretty flexible viable model, which allows us also to model the shape of the viable distribution depending on a number of predictors. Those predictors there are denoted by beta k, and there are also two extra parameters for this baseline hazard, lambda and k. And so basically we need to estimate all those parameters which are listed here for each quarter, and then we would use this model to see whether any particular HIP and CARP combinations differ from the gold standard in each quarter. So we are trying to do a likelihood ratio test basically at each quarter, and I will show you how it looks in practice, because we don't know the distribution of our likelihood ratio scores in each quarter. We are using Bootstrap to calculate the p-values, and we also using false discovery rate at a very low level, 1 on 160, to select failed brands. Basically, this low level would allow us to have an average run length of about 40 years before one false discovery, so that we won't have many false alarms, hopefully. Those are the parameter estimates from one of the models. They change by each quarter, but you can see here says that age is has a parameter less than 1, so the older patient the less is the risk of revision. Say uncemented hips have a higher risk of revision, and then say resurfacing metal combination of CARP and brand has a very high risk of revision, and so on. You can see here two sets of parameters for a model without frailty and for a model with frailty. And for a model with frailty, you see that there is quite a high frailty component there. So basically, it's worth including frailty in the model. Right, here are the results. So you can see here are results for 8 different CARP and head combinations, and those colored circles, field circles, appear there when the alarm is triggered. So you can see that, for instance, for the green one, which is Enter Plus, particular implant, alarms started from sometime in 2009 and continue onwards. For the DPUI ISR system, which are the red and the blue circles, alarms start sometime in 2011 here. And this DPUI is exactly that system which was on the headline in The Guardian. And also there is another one, which is the black one, which is a Biomet to A38 hip implant there. And alarm for that one also starts sometime in 2011. This is the same thing, but for a model without frailty. And here we can detect one of the DPUI implants even earlier in 2009. The rest is more or less the same. So this is a summary. You can see here that for a model without frailty, we detected Enter Plus and DPUI, one of the DPUIs in the fourth quarter of 2009. And the second DPUI implant in the second quarter of 2011, and the Biomet in the fourth quarter of 2011. If we want to compare those results to the standard National Joint Register technique, how they detect it, they detected the problems with DPUI in July 2010, so somewhere in the middle between our two models. And for the Biomet, alarm was issued only in 2014, whereas we detected it back in 2011. So it seems that we're doing reasonably well. So to conclude, because we use a flexible parameterization of the hazard function and included the frailty component, it seems that it allows us to improve the model fit. And you saw also some other brands there, but what was really interesting in those plots, I kind of forgot to mention them. There are other field-colored circles there, but they appear there only once, and then they disappear. So we kind of have alarm triggered, but that alarm is there only for one quarter, and then it's not there anymore. So what we should really look at is not just one alarm, but at a stable behavior over 2-3 quarters before being really worried. And basically, we are hoping to develop the methods further to get them kind of good enough to be kind of provided for in GWAR as a standard technique for monitoring. I think that's it. Thank you.
Data is now more continuously generated than ever before. This is, you can see it in all being generated in huge volumes and at rapid speed. So today I'll be talking about detecting events from structured and unstructured data streams. Before going into our framework for event detection, I would like to define what is a data stream. A data stream is a continuous sequence or flow of data generated in real time and almost at high velocity. This can be produced from sensor readings, from social networks, financial markets such as stock prices and foreign exchange markets. Challenges in these data streams, this is that the data arrives in almost real time and at high velocity. Also, the arrival rate of the data elements is unpredictable. The stream size is unknown or unbounded size. Also, data elements, it's not possible to backtrack over the past arrived data elements or keep track of the entire history. So it's difficult to detect and identify the occurrent event in such agile and dynamic environments. So in this presentation, we intend to show methods that can deal with the changing and dynamic streams. For our unstructured data stream, detecting events from unstructured data streams, we are using social media streams. So unstructured data is data that doesn't have typically having a data model to represent it, such as data coming from sensor readings, social networks, financial markets, emails, images. All these are unstructured data. So sometimes social media produce content about real-time events almost in real time through the social media participants who could be the news agencies, politicians, CEOs, or even ordinary people. So the social media streams can be used as sensors for real-world events. Sometimes events spread faster on social media rather than via other forms of media, and they are more discussed there. This is especially for unplanned or unknown events rather than the planned ones, such as natural disasters or political events. An example is the Ferguson shooting which took place on Missouri in August 2015. It was first discussed in Twitter rather than any other media. So briefly, this is our event detection framework for the unstructured data stream. We have here our data stream, which is Twitter. So then we have to define our window batch. The window batch can be of any time frame, daily, hourly. And then for each window, we have to dynamically define the support value, because we are using the frequent pattern mining approach to find the frequent patterns, and we are replacing the fixed support value to be dynamically calculated, and then we will have our frequent patterns detected, and then we have a post-processing step, and then we have our detected events. For each window patch, we may have no events detected at all or n detected events. So we use the frequent pattern mining for finding the frequent patterns, and the support is an indicator of how frequently an item set appears in a data set. So it's a metric for item retrieval. We propose a dynamic support definition method to replace the fixed ones, because as we have the window size is not fixed. So today we might have, let's say, 1,000 tweets, and tomorrow we might have 10,000 tweets. So it's more appropriate to have a dynamic support rather than having a fixed one. This is the algorithm for defining the support value. I will not go through it, but I'm happy to discuss it anytime. Simply how we define the support value is depending on the frequency of terms, the words frequency, because in text stream, the direct indicator of impact is the terms frequency in text streams. Here's an example of our detected events from a single window. Here we have 2 events detected, and we associate each event with the news headline. So here are our experimental results. We had 2 streams. We have one stream was related to the general elections in 2015 and the Greece crisis also in 2015. As there was no publicly available topics data set accompanied with the ground truth of topics, we had to create a golden standard list from the BBC News headlines for the investigated major events. More than 88% of topics identified using our dynamic frequent pattern approach were found on the same day news articles concerning that topic were released. And now for our second approach, which is for detecting event from structured data, where now we have a defined data model. So we are using financial time series price streams. So identifying price movements is crucial in financial markets, as these price changes represent an investment opportunity. So from a price time series data stream, we present a method to detect events, which we mean significant price movements using the directional change approach. Here is an example for significant price change that took place on 24th of June 2016 after the leave vote on 23rd of June. So we can see that the prices on 24th of June, the FTSE 100 index prices went lower more than 8% on the opening of the 24th of June. So to detect the events from our financial stream, we use the directional change approach. It's basically an approach for summarizing price movements using a fixed threshold. If the prices go higher or lower than this fixed threshold, then a directional change event is detected. For example, here, the prices on 2nd of February went lower than the fixed threshold, so an event was detected. For our framework for detecting events from structured data stream, we have the time series stream, and then if we proposed a dynamic approach for defining this threshold rather than using a fixed threshold that does not change through the entire stream. Why we decided to have a dynamic threshold? Let's say that in the current day, if we have a fixed threshold, which is 2%, and then in the current day, the prices went down 1.9%. As the threshold is not satisfied, no event is detected, while in the next day, let's say the prices went more 0.1 threshold, 0.1, the prices went down more. Now an event is detected as the threshold is met, although that the price change that took place now is not significant like the previous day. So we proposed a dynamic support instead to detect the events, which is significant price movements from financial streams. So from our time series stream, if we have an opening price, a new price is coming for the current day, then we calculate or define its support, its threshold value. If not, then we just check for event detection. Our framework is suitable for markets who operate and having opening and closing days, such opening and closing times, such as the stock markets. Here we define our dynamic support, our dynamic threshold for the directional change. It is basically defined using the previous day price changes and the overnight price changes. So every day we'll have a new dynamic threshold is used. The dynamic threshold provides more flexibility by allowing the identification of price changes of different magnitudes in continuously changing and dynamic environments. This is our algorithm for defining the dynamic threshold. Also, I'll not go through it now, but I'm happy to discuss it through break times. We applied an experiment on the dynamic threshold, our proposed dynamic threshold with the directional change. We were able to detect 20 events from July 2015 till March 2016. The events are shown as black dots. There is two types of events, either an upturn event or a downturn event. Here we show that we compare between the dynamic versus fixed threshold. Here we show the events detected using our dynamic threshold and using different fixed threshold. With fixed threshold, events are detected either after or before the true event is released. We mean by true event is the news headlines. While with the dynamic threshold, on the other hand, events were detected on the same day that the news headlines were released. And so this could help us to spot the market move at the right time. Also, to further evaluate our dynamic support, our dynamic threshold, we used the dynamic threshold through a trading strategy, and we compared the profits against fixed threshold and even other trading strategies, and we got good profit results. This is overall what I was talking about, which is the detecting of event from structured and unstructured data streams. We used a text stream from social media, which is the unstructured stream, and the prices time series stream for our structured data stream. We were trying to detect events from both streams. A daily dynamic threshold definition method was proposed to be used to replace the fixed given threshold. Most importantly, the proposed methods were trying to deal with the dynamic and changing environments of the data streams. And that's it for me. Thank you.